Welcome to our webinar titled Living with MDS, a patient panel discussion. My name is Lee Clark, Director of Patient Services, and I'll be moderating the panel today. As we get started, I'd like to recognize the generous support of our corporate sponsors and the generous support of our patients, families, and caregivers for supporting the program today. It is possible you may lose your connection during the program. If you do lose your connection and you're unable to view the program online, you can call in to hear the audio portion using the call-in number in your reminder email. Today's program will be archived to our website within several business days. You will be notified by email when it is live and ready for viewing. Since this is a patient panel discussion, please feel free to submit your questions at any time throughout the presentation. To submit a question or comment, please use the Q&A window in the lower part of your screen. Type in your question or comment in the small text box window. When you have finished typing, just hit enter. We'll do our best to get to everyone's questions today. When asking questions, I do ask that you do two things to help me manage the incoming questions. First, submit your entire question all at the same time. Second, please do not share private health information in your question. This webinar is a patient panel, and our panelists today are not medical professionals and will not be able to answer specific questions related to your health care or give medical advice. Our panelists today are three patients. We have Joan Powell, Brian Anderson, and Ellie Grossman. So thank you all very much for joining us today. Tomorrow is World MDS Awareness Day. So thank you for taking the time out of your schedule today to help us with bringing awareness and sharing your stories to be able to help with other patients. So we'll start out, if you guys would like to take a couple minutes and introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about your MDS journey. Joan, would you like to start?
Sure. Hi, as you said, my name is Joan Powell, and I'm a survivor of MDS since, I always say October 30th of 2014. I was diagnosed on Halloween. The children were out giving, I was giving out trick-or-treat candies, and at that time, my hematologist called me and said, we finally made a diagnosis after 6 months. You have a disease called MDS. And I'm like, I got multiple sclerosis? She goes, oh no, it's a myelodysplastic syndrome. She said, you have to take a pencil and write it down, and it's a rare blood disease, but I just want to tell you, Joan, there's no cure for you at this time. It's only treatment. Well, I said, well, at least I don't have cancer. She goes, oh no. She says, it's in the leukemia family. Promise me, when we hang up, come into my office tomorrow and I'm going to go in detail, but don't go on the internet. Well, went on the internet, almost was floored. I lived by myself, grabbed an old teddy bear my mother gave me years ago, and I took it and went to bed like a child. I was totally devastated in a state of shock. So that was back in 2014. Now I'm a patient advocate. I love sharing my journey and my story. I'm a speaker. I tell people I've been from the steps of the Capitol in Washington, D.C. to the beaches of California. I am a support group facilitator for this foundation that has basically, I say, has been a lifesaver with regards to my journey with MDS. So I leave you with a saying that I tell everybody from the Shawshank Redemption: you either have a choice, you either get busy living or get busy dying. Well, my choice is to get busy living, and I thank you.
Thank you, Joan. Brian, would you like to go next?
I would, but that is a tough act to follow. Wow, thank you for setting me up. That's perfect. No, again, my name is Brian Anderson. Thank you all for coming and listening and sharing in your experience as well. I was initially diagnosed similar to Joan a while ago, and not diagnosed, excuse me. I noticed something was different in 2013. I was 48 years old at the time, And I'm 57 now, so you can see it's been a long time for me as well. In 2016, I was finally given a diagnosis. So for Joan, it took 6 months. For me, it took a little longer. My version of MDS is similar, has sort of an overlap with aplastic anemia in that I'm hypocellular with excess blasts. So, but now we're working toward that. But I guess the bottom line is it took a while to figure out what was going on. I was on watch and wait for a while, and now it looks like we're transitioning again, and I'm onto a new phase and a new part of my journey. And it looks like we're going toward a bone marrow transplant within the next couple of months. So that's my story. And again, similar to Joan, I also host a support group here. I live in the Washington, D.C. area, so it's a local group with some folks that are share similar experiences and difficulties here. So glad to be a part of this panel. And I don't have an ending rousing quote like Joan, so I feel a little bit thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Ellie?
Hi, I'm Ellie Grossman. I live in the New York area, and I've been in New York all my life. So I'm a real New Yorker. I have an accent, if you think I do, but I know I do. I have MDS. I was officially diagnosed this past March. 2 years ago, when I had my first bone marrow biopsy, they didn't think it was MDS. They thought it was pre-MDS because I didn't have some of the typical mutations that people with MDS have. Well, I still don't have them, which is a good thing. But I do have all my bloodlines, my white blood count, red blood count, and platelets are all they have dysplasia, which means they're wonky looking. So they're not producing properly. And all my numbers have been steadily going down. Right? They go down, they level out, they go down, they level out. And that's been what's happening for me. I'm on watch and wait. I get a shot of a drug called Aranesp, which is a red blood cell booster every time I go to get my blood work, which is about every 2 weeks. And I developed my MDS because I've had chemo and radiation in the past. And I have what they call a secondary MDS. So if I hadn't had the other cancers, I probably wouldn't have this, but it's the way it is. And to end, my favorite quote is from Milton Berle: I love to laugh and I laugh to live. Because without laughter, I don't want to go there.
Thanks, Ellie, so much. Thank you guys for sharing a little bit about you. And Ellie, will stay with you. What led you to your diagnosis of MDS? What type of symptoms were you having?
I was having fatigue that I did not know what was causing it. And I went for a blood test because I was going to have another operation because I developed a hernia in a very tender place that we wanted to remove. And when I went to my doctor to get everything ready, he says, we're postponing your appointment with us. And I go, why? And he goes, your white blood count is too low. So that's when it started. Then I go to Sloan Kettering in Manhattan. So they assigned me to a lovely hematologist, oncologist. He did 1 million tests on me, including my fingernails. They took clippings to see if it was genetic, which it isn't in my case. And that's when I found out that something was wrong. And when I look back on my blood counts from 2016 on, that's when they started changing. And that's when I had my first, a major surgery because I had rectal cancer at that point. And that's when it started. And I found out I also had ovarian and uterine cancer back in 2001. And I had chemo and radiation then, but it's a combination. They don't really know which one gave me MDS, but it could have been what I took in 2001. It could have been what I took in 2015. All of them can cause MDS. So I like discounts. I got 3 for 1, the 4 for 1. So what can I tell you? It's not fun, but it's what it is, my new normal.
Thank you, Ellie. Brian, what led to your diagnosis? What types of symptoms were you having before your diagnosis?
You know, that's a great question. Similar to Ellie, honestly, I was asymptomatic. I actually had been running half marathons and triathlons with my family for quite some time. I was never really good, and I'd never get on the podium because I always seemed to run out of gas at some point. I never understood why, but I went to my doctor. I was coming up on 50, and I figured, well, I better see what he's going to say. And he called me back after a routine blood test and said, we need to keep checking on this. So they did. And then finally in 2016, after a number of ruling out all these different things, they finally came up with MDS. So really, what led me was just the routine process of seeing my primary care doctor. And I really never had any warning that this was smoldering, if you would, in my marrow.
Thank you, Brian. Joan, what about you?
A very active, still am, woman. I was putting on a big event for an organization that I am the president of. And I was talking to my sister who lives in Florida. I said, boy, I'm so tired. She says, you're complaining about being tired for the last couple of weeks. She said, you just need to pull back and have somebody else help you. She said, on second thought, maybe you need to go to the doctor because you're talking about how you're getting short of breath and getting dizzy, and you go to a grocery store, you can't even complete your shopping list. So I made a call to my doctor, and the next day he said, come in. He said, let's do some blood work. He says, you look so pale, Jen. Are you okay? And I'm like, that's why I'm here, doc. So he says, okay. The next day he calls me. I don't think it was 24 hours. Go straight to the emergency room. Your red cell blood count is 5.5. You're subject to a heart attack or a stroke. Don't drive. Get someone to drive you. So I went there and they did all these examinations and everything, and colonoscopy, upper GI, lower GI, and the whole bit. And they gave me 3 units of blood. And then they said, well, you're in good health. We don't understand what's going on. So it was a 6 months process, getting blood work done. You name every test in America I had to find the bone biopsy came. But my symptoms were shortness of breath, at times being kind of like lethargic, not able to climb, as I said, climb the stairs without having to stop. I live on the 2nd floor, but it was mainly the shortness of breath. And that is really scary when you can't have a hard time catching your breath. So that was my those were my symptoms.
Thanks, Joan. Brian, after your diagnosis, what treatment options were suggested, or what did your team discuss with you would be your treatment options?
Yeah, that's a great question. So because of the uniqueness, I think, of my subtype of MDS with a hypoplastic, similar to aplastic anemia, I was offered and partook in ATG treatment. So for 4 days, in 2016, I was hospitalized and infused with ATG, and then followed by a 6-month cycle, 6-month period of cyclosporin to try to suppress my immune system, because the thought was that what I have was related to an overactive immune system, and I'm kind of attacking my own blood cell. That didn't work, unfortunately. So in June of 2017, we stopped that treatment. And at that time, and still, we really didn't have any other options for me other than waiting for a transplant. So for me, it was ATG. If that worked, great. If not, watch and wait until a transplant, which is where I have been in this watch and wait mode since that point.
Thank you, Brian. Joan, how about you? After your diagnosis, what did your team discuss with you about your treatment options?
Well, before my diagnosis, I was in the hospital almost every month getting a red cell transfusion, usually 2 units at a time because my count was constantly dropping. So finally, when they made the diagnosis, they said, well, You're going to have a life filled with transfusions. Fortunately, your blood count is O positive, so that you're compatible. He said, but they also said we're going to give you what they call Procrit at the time, was a self-injection in my abdomen. And you're going to do that once a week. Well, that didn't work. Then it went up to twice a week. Then it went up to 3 times a week. And then it's been a roller coaster of various medication, Artemis, Revlimid, you name it. So right now I'm on a drug called Rebuzol, Lupatarsine. I'm not good with medical terminology. So, and I'm still getting transfusions. I was telling Lee earlier that I have a transfusion on Wednesday. I'm getting 2 units. I had a new doctor who just wanted to do a month at a, 1 unit at a time. Well, that's only lasting me about 30 days. Usually if I have 2 units, it'll last me from almost up to 90 days, 3 months. And that's great for me. So my life is filled with getting blood tests every week to see where my counts are, blood transfusions every, let's say 2.5 to 3 months usually, and having this drug that I take every 21 days that is administered by my doctor. So I have to go in and see my doctor for that to help support my my bone marrow. So that's my regimen right now.
Thanks, Joan. Ellie, what did your team talk with you about what your treatment options would be?
Well, they told me about watch and wait. And they said if my numbers change, then there's different medications, different chemos I can go on. Some of them are the ones that Joan has told you about, and possibly a bone marrow transplant, but they weren't sure if I'd be a candidate for a bone marrow transplant. And I saw my doctor on Thursday of last week, and I asked her about it. Would I be a candidate for a bone marrow transplant? I'm 72, and I know that some of the hospitals have cutoff dates, but now they're learning that they can have slightly older people have a transplant and be okay with it. But I had a heart attack last summer, and that might disqualify me. And I've had 3 cancers, and that might disqualify me. So I have no idea what my future is going to be. If they offer me one, I'll take it, because I don't give up easily. If not, I hope that they invent a new medication by the time I need it that can help me. Because some of the medications, the drugs they now have, they're specific for different kinds of mutations that you can get. So if you don't have that mutation, it may not work. So I hope, and I don't have those mutations. So that's where I'm at.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Ellie. Ellie, you mentioned that you were being treated with Aranesp. Do you suffer any side effects? And if so, what are those?
Well, I did take Procrit back in 2001, and it burned going in. It was a very painful drug. The needle didn't hurt, it's the drug that hurt. And I take the Aranesp, I get a shot in my arm, and it burns like the dickens. And you would think in 21 years they would figure out how to make a medication that doesn't burn, but they haven't. So I figured out that the people who invented it don't need it, because they've never had to take it. If they did, they would find a way to have it not burn. That's my pet peeve. But I get the Aranesp every time I get my blood work done, because if it goes below 11.0, I get a shot. And I haven't been above the mid-10s for 3 years.
Thanks, Ellie. Joan, any side effects from luspatercept?
Not at this time. They've actually, the last time I talked to you, Lee, I was at 75 milligrams. Now my new doctor has bumped me up to 85, so I got an additional 10. Right now, it's just been the first time that it's been increased, so there's no results to say whether or not it's going to help me or not. But I don't have any side effects from that.
I had none from the Aranesp except pain in my arm.
Brian, how about you? Any side effects from any treatments or anything that you've used?
So the ATG was a while ago, but I can tell you that cyclosporin is not a fun drug to be on. One of the fun side effects is you grow hair everywhere. So it was, but other than that, and it made me very nauseous and very it was just, and it also crashed my numbers. And it was at that point that we decided that the side effects were worse than the treatment, and it was not helping me as to do what it was intended to do, which is jumpstart my bone marrow and get me back on track. So we terminated that course.
Thanks, Brian. After your initial diagnosis, did any of you seek a second opinion? Brian, would you like to take that one first?
I think second, third, fourth, and fifth, I think I'm on now. Yes, I started with a local hematologist, went to another local hematologist, found a top doctor at Moffitt Cancer Center, also found a doctor in Boston. Here in DC, I've been to Johns Hopkins as well as Georgetown. I don't think there's anything wrong with going around and finding unique, different opinions, as well as maybe slight course change corrections that additional doctors may have. And I actively sought that out throughout my entire course of treatment.
Thank you, Brian. Joan, did you seek a second opinion after your diagnosis?
But basically what happened was the Procrit wasn't working. And my hematologist at the time said, I don't know what we're going to do. I'm going to refer you to a specialist. And I don't want to mention his name, but he's on the board now, the patient council from the City of Hope and outside of Los Angeles. I go around to various conferences and I also attend webinars, and I don't have a problem asking questions, or at a conference, I'll go up to the doctor afterwards and just, he doesn't have my medical records, but I'll tell them, in a quick minute or two what my situation is. There's a doctor here in San Diego that has attended various support groups that I belong to, that it's a question and answer period. So I don't have 4 or 5 like Brian would have, but if it's necessary, I would do what he had to do. And most doctors would agree, sure, go ahead. And a lot of them already know each other because they're in the MDS family. So yes, I have had second opinions from various sources.
Ellie, how about you? Did you seek a second opinion after
I did,
your
and it was
diagnosis?
I did, and it was the doctor that I saw on one of the first webinars that I watched from the MDS Foundation. And she basically agreed with the doctor I had at Sloan, which in a way was good. But I know that if they want me to go on any other medication, I'm going to definitely look into seeing more people to find out what they would do, just to see if the consensus is the same. Because I don't want to take a medication that I don't really need. And I want to take one that I do really need if someone else comes up with something. So that I believe in them also. And I've had one so far.
Thanks, Ellie. Were you nervous about getting a second opinion? And if so, what made you nervous?
I was a little nervous. I wasn't nervous about my original doctor being upset with it, because I had told her and she said, good, I wanted you to do that, which was nice. I was just nervous to see what they would tell me. Would they tell me something totally different? Would they give me worse information, that things are worse for me? Because the doctor I did see, the second one, basically told me I wouldn't be a candidate for a bone marrow transplant because of my past cancer history. So I wasn't too happy with that. I have a new hematologist now because the one I originally had at Sloan left Sloan and she's working somewhere else. So they hired a new specialist from Ohio, and I'm assigned to her. And so far I like her. She's very knowledgeable.
Great. That's great news. Brian, how about you? Were you nervous going to get your second opinions? And if so, what made you nervous?
I think similar to Ellie, I don't think I was necessarily nervous about the feeling of would I offend my doctor or somehow upset the apple cart, the medical apple cart, if you would. I have been in some way, shape, or form in healthcare almost my entire career. I started out as a biomedical engineer, so I worked in this environment, so I know doctors are used to that. But I think, again, similar to Ellie, I was a little bit nervous as to what they may find. Again, if you look under the rock, just be prepared that you may not like what you see. And so that was the thing that I had to deal with, that uncertainty, as opposed to concern that I'm, going to offend my doctor. In fact, he embraced it and said, go and do it. So.
Brian, with the multiple opinions you received, how did you decide which of those opinions that you were going to go with? Or was it a compilation of multiple things that people were suggesting? How did you kind of come to what was being recommended to you from multiple specialists, as in, I think this is the best plan for me?
Yeah, that's a great question, Lee, because there's a lot that goes into it. It's not just hearing a doctor maybe say a treatment plan that I agree with or I want, but there's all these other intangibles that come into this picture, and they include insurance. Is this going to be paid for in this by this doctor group, as well as location? How convenient is it to me as a patient and my caregivers to travel and to do this? So I'll give you for instance of Boston. My family is from Boston, so being there was going to be a benefit to me. I could be near my family. That's a plus, but there were other minuses in that I'm away from my job, my office. And so I had to weigh all those things together in the end, and then assimilate myself, or bring together in a cohesive manner all these opinions and see which one makes sense for me, and just take some time, discuss it with my caregivers, discuss it with my family, what made sense. And that it's a lot of work to do that.
Thank you, Brian. Joan, you mentioned you sought a second opinion. Were you nervous about going? Like, how did you feel about going to get that second opinion?
My first doctor was a hematologist. Small practice. We had a hematologist on one side and an oncologist on the other side. And I asked her how many MDS patients she had. And she said, oh, I have a few. And I'm like, a few is not good for me, because I'd rather you have a lot. I didn't say that to her. So she said, this medication is not working. I'm going to refer you to a specialist. And I was overjoyed, because I said, they probably know what's going on. I mean, I didn't think that she didn't know. But then prior to me going to the hospital, they called just to verify my appointment. And they said, oh, you're coming in here to get evaluated for a stem cell transplant. And I'm playing kind of stupid, like, I said, oh yeah, sure. Then I got really upset and I called my doctor, my hematologist. And I said, what are you talking about? It's really gotten to that point, And she says, well, Joan, as Brian says, it's the insurance. We have to write it up as if you're on your deathbed. And if the only way you're going to survive is to have this stem cell transplant, and the only way that the insurance is going to pay for you to see this specialist, if we write it up like this. Do you understand? And I never said anything again. Anytime they want to refer me somewhere or do something, I said, oh, it's all about insurance billing. But no, I was not frightened. I was glad. I was really glad. And then when I went up to the medical facility, I was like, wow, if I lived in this area, I definitely would change my medical provider to this area. But, and now, real quick, I have another doctor after 12 years, and that's a different story. And I feel like he's a specialist, because he's in a cancer center with a lot of doctors, and several of them specialize in MDS. So I'm just like, I'm kind of a happy camper right now.
Thanks, Joan. We'll stay with you, Joan. After your diagnosis and figuring out all of your treatment options, how did you go about telling family and friends about your diagnosis? Because that can be difficult.
Now I can laugh. Like I said, I can laugh about it. But when I first told my family, I have 5 other siblings, and I said, "Oh my gosh, I have a disease. it's called MDS. And, I was telling them, I said, Robert Roberts, I think that's from Good Morning America, she had it. They call it a smoldering leukemia and all that. And the first thing they said to me, is it contagious? And I'm like, it's a rare form of anemia. I said, in my case. And I said, and the medication is so expensive. You know what they said to me? What are you going to do? I'm like, wait a minute, you're my family. You're supposed to be there to support me. So that's how my family looked at it. Now, my friends, they were like, well, you look really good. What do you mean you have this rare blood disease? You look good. I said, my disease is invisible. My bone marrow produces the red cells, but they don't have any longevity. They're defective. I said, a lot of cancers are not physically that you can see. They expected me to lose my hair and the whole bit. So that was my initiation into it. But now when I tell people, I think they don't want to know. They just kind of clueless. And then I start talking about, my symptoms, and, they're like, well, I have that too. You think I have it? And I'm like, well, the only way you're really going to know is to have blood work done. So that was my initial initiation to the world. But now that I'm an advocate, sometimes they'll say things that'll go in one ear and out the next. So that's my journey.
Ellie, how about you? How did you talk to family and friends about your new diagnosis?
I told my immediate family right away, and they were not happy about it. They were very upset. But at the time, I didn't know that it was true MDS. So there was a chance it may not be. However, I knew in my heart that it really was. I could tell that when I did some research myself, what symptoms I was having, that I did have it. Some of my friends were concerned, and I would say that only 2 of my friends are people that I can talk to about how I'm feeling. When other people say, how do you feel? I just say, oh, I'm doing okay. I'm hanging in. I know they don't want to hear the answer. I know they're afraid of the answer because they're afraid they're going to get it. And that's been a problem, I think, that I really don't have a lot of people to discuss it with. So I found this website that we're on, and then I found Brian. Luckily and unluckily, COVID had hit just when I found out I had MDS, and he started having Zoom meetings because I don't live anywhere near DC. I live in New York. And I joined his Zoom group. And then I found another one in the south of New Jersey, which also is about 2.5, 3 hours from where I live. And they do it on Zoom. So I'm in those 2 groups, and they have really helped me because I can ask them questions and they know the answers because they've been there and done that. Or they tell me what they would recommend I do and who I could go see, because they see other specialists also. And it's a wonderful way to network and just find people that understand, because unless you've had cancer, you don't get it. Definitely not. And
Ellie.
that's the frustrating part, because people look at me and say, you're not sick. What's wrong with you? Well, as Joan said, you want to see my blood? You want to change blood with me? No, they don't want to.
Thanks.
So it's been hard for that reason. I thank goodness for Brian and the other group that I'm in. So thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Ellie. Brian, how about you? How was the conversation with family and friends after your diagnosis?
That's interesting to think about now. I think we had to gather my family. I have 4 kids and some extended family, and we gathered them together so we can discuss sort of the new reality. Once I was diagnosed, in my case, all 3 of my bloodlines are low, and my white cells are almost non-existent. My latest ANC was 0.09. So pretty much I'm at risk. And so we needed to stress to them to understand what the disease was and how they could help me keep safe. And that was something that it wasn't so much that, I needed them to feel sorry for me, or it was just that, look, this is the new reality. Let's discuss the wearing of the masks. And this was back in, remember, this is 2016. I'm wearing masks and limiting, guys, we can't have kids over the house anymore in large parties, which I loved. I love to host and have that type of thing. But we had to structure as a family to understand what this meant, to help myself, but also, let my family live as well. So what can we do? What modifications can we do? So that was not an easy conversation, but necessary.
Thank you. When you're going to a doctor's appointment, what kinds of things do you do to prepare for your appointments? Brian, you want to go ahead and take that one first?
Yeah, I'll do my latest appointment as an example. I now know, as I think I mentioned, I'm heading for a bone marrow transplant, and on Halloween next week, I'll start my first round of Idesa to knock down my blast count. So I understood that this was going to happen, but we didn't have the logistics down yet. We didn't understand the dotting of the I's and crossing of the T's. So I went online here with the MDS International Foundation and other primary research sites to see if I can myself get some additional information, absorb what is Vidasa, what does it mean from other patients that I've known, and I've called them up in advance of that meeting and said, hey, George, what was your experience on Vidasa? So not that it would be the same for me, but at least I would have an experience, one data point that said, this happened to some guy. It might happen to me, it might not, but at least I began to understand a little bit with better clarity what might happen. So I think going into that meeting with your doctor with a little bit of knowledge, even if it's just talking to a friend or a nurse or someone else that has some insight into this, helps you to understand better the stuff that's going to come out of that doctor's mouth, because there's a lot of it, and a lot of it's technical, and it's going to come fast. So if you can absorb some of it from doing a little bit of advanced research, I think that's what's helped me.
Thanks, Brian. Joan, how about you? What are some things you do to prepare for medical appointments?
So I had for those past 12, no, I would say 11 years, I had the same oncologist. So my routine was a little bit different from Brian. Basically, I would go in and he would have my blood counts and say, well, it seems like everything's working now, the Rebazole, and I'll see you back in 3 months. And I'd be, no stress. Now I have a new doctor. First time I went in there, he didn't really let me say anything. He was just like, yeah. And I'm like, wow, no compassion whatsoever. So I left there and I said, I don't know if this doctor's going to be my doctor, because I'm used to having a conversation. I'm a well-read person when it comes to MDS. So anyway, then I went back again, and I have somewhat developed high blood pressure over the years. I don't know how it happened. So every time I go in there now, I think this was like 3 or 4 times, my blood pressure just shot up. So they were more concerned about my blood pressure than anything else. So make a long story short, he says, I was telling him about my prior doctor. He said, that's fine and good, but I'm your doctor now, and I have my own way of looking at this disease and the approach that we're going to take. So I want you to have these different medical tests, and I want you to have another bone marrow biopsy. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. He goes, Joan, it's been almost 12 years. You kind of want to figure out where you are at this stage. So anyway, I'll tell you this, and hopefully it'll make you laugh. So, you have the bone marrow biopsy, you're in pain for a week or so, and then you go back because you're all nervous because what are the results going to be? Am I going to still be at the same area that I was before with my disease? So, I'm all nervous, blood pressure's high. And then he comes through the door, he says, oh, I forgot something, I'll be right back. I just started crying. And he goes, what's wrong with you? And I'm like, doctor, I've been waiting all this time, and now you're telling me you'll be right back. I said, this is just too much. And he says, you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. I'll be right back. So I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, well, he says I'm going to be okay. So I guess I'm diagnosing myself based on I'm going to be okay. So he comes in and he tells me, yes, it's still the same. You're still at the ring fibroblast area. of your disease. He said, but I think this medication, you're having too many transfusions. I'm going to start something new. And he's talking and he's like talking to me in a foreign language. We're going to do this, we're going to do that, and we'll do that. And I'm like, hold on a second. I said, I got to digest some of the things you're saying. I said, let me think about it and I'll come back. And then he said, well, can we just try the Revlimid? Not the Revlimid, so many medications. The Revizol, I'm going to bounce it up another 10 milligrams. You okay with that? And I said, yeah, I'm used to that medication. I have not had any effects of it at all. But as I said, after 12 years of being with the same doctor, and then all of a sudden you switch over, it was very hard for me because, I knew the doctor and we had a good relationship. So now I'm starting to learn this new doctor. But I think after this last doctor's visit, I think he's learning that he has to be a little bit more compassionate with me. So that's my story.
Thanks, Joan.
Mhm.
Ellie, how about you? What are some things you do to prepare when it's time for your doctor's visits?
Well, I discovered that the more I know, the calmer I am. The less I know, the crazier I get. So I want to know everything, good and bad. I do research online, or I go to a library like I used to when I was younger, and I write questions down, and I write every single question. And I sit with the doctor and I ask them every single one, and I check them off as I do it, so I don't forget if I get on a tangent that I really need to ask this question. And if the doctor doesn't want to answer them, I will find another doctor because I pay them. They don't pay me. And I've really become a little hard-nosed because I've had people push me aside because I'm only a little woman and what do I know? Well, I surprise them. I know a hell of a lot. And I really feel that it's very worthwhile learning about what you have so that you understand as much as possible. I also had my brother in on the first appointment after my bone marrow biopsy. So he would hear what the doctor said as a second pair of ears, because after a while, it just goes over your head because you're so shocked that this is happening. I also have asked permission from some doctors, can I tape it? So I videotape it on my phone, and then I can listen to it again and hear what I missed the first time. Most of them are very apt. They say, sure, no problem. And that's how I deal with it. And
Thanks,
prepare.
Ellie. Ellie, we'll stay with you. For a newly diagnosed patient,
Mhm.
what's your best advice? What are things that, looking back to when you were diagnosed, what are some things you wish you had known? What's your advice for somebody who's newly
Okay.
diagnosed?
I wish I had known about AAMDS Foundation and MDS and the MDS Foundation sooner, because I didn't find them till about 5 or 6 months after I was diagnosed. And it was just luck that I found it. So I wish I had known, because that would have given me more peace of mind because I would have understood it better. And I think joining a support group was vital to help me because I couldn't talk to my friends or family, really. And I knew that when I had the ovarian uterine cancer in 2001, I joined Gilda's Club, which was a support group back then. And it was a lifesaver. So those are the things I would recommend. Find a support group and look at these 2 websites because they have wonderful, real information. I look at some of the other things online with a grain of salt because you don't know if they're real or not. Anything I see on these 2 websites, I know are genuine and I could trust them.
Thanks, Ellie. Joan, how about you? What are some things that you would recommend for newly diagnosed patients?
Agree with Ellie 100%. I felt like the Lone Ranger when I got diagnosed. I didn't have anybody to talk to. My family, they were clueless.
Mhm.
My doctor had a few patients, but wouldn't give up the information for confidential reasons. So then I just started going on the website and I discovered AAMDS. I attended one of their conferences and I'm like, wow, these people look just like me. I mean, in reference to not visually, but just inside of them. And then I attended a conference for the MDS. I was just conference oriented. Whatever MDS had, I was going to attend to, or
Mhm.
Zoom has helped out a lot too over the last couple of years because I said, what's going to happen? We can't meet face to face. So, and then I met a lady, it was through the LLS, Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. They have what they call First Connection, a peer group here where one-on-one, but she had a transplant, but she was there for me for about 6 months. But reaching out, support groups. I joined a support group in California, and to make a little sadness, our leader passed on a couple weeks ago. So that was very sad. But the support groups, I tell you, I mean, now through all this experience and with the assistance of Lee and the MDS, now I have a support group, what they call a West Coast support group. And it's been a joy to share my journey. And I'm learning from other members too in the support group, how important it is to have someone to talk to, you can get real with. And that has been my life-saving after having this disease.
Thanks, Joan. Brian, how about you? What's your best advice for a newly diagnosed patient and family?
I'm going to echo Ellie and Joan, but simply say, don't do what I think I did initially, which was the ostrich effect, and buried my head in the sand. My doctor had mentioned, don't go online. And I think there's some validity to that, because there is, as both mentioned, some data out there, especially survival data and things like that, that are very confusing and very difficult to digest initially. But I chose to just ignore it all, and that just ate away. So I think what they said, reaching out to this organization, getting the facts just delivered in a clear, concise manner, the delivery in video and simple graphic format of what is MDS and what does it mean to me as a patient, and in particular, my particular version of MDS helps. Knowledge is power. That's all I got to say.
Thank you. Brian, we'll stay with you. Our next question is, what things did you do to help with fatigue?
So fatigue is a relatively new experience for me, unlike others here and probably many on this call. My red cells initially were relatively good. It was my whites and platelets which had tanked. So fatigue I didn't struggle with until lately. And then I noticed that the way that I personally needed to handle that was get up and walk, get up and exercise, do things physically that challenge myself in a way that made sense, not to overdo it, because there's only so much gas in that tank, but to continue to move and to exercise my body. In the end of the day, I might be tired and I go to sleep, well, but I noticed that I needed to step up my game of late. As this fatigue, as my hemoglobin lowers, I need to challenge myself more. So that's what I've done.
Thanks, Brian. Ellie, how about you? How have you dealt with fatigue?
If I'm fatigued today, if I do more than one thing today, I get fatigued. I know that tomorrow I have to relax a little. I have to just not do as much or not do anything to build back my energy. And that has helped. Taking naps doesn't do a thing for me. I wake up just as tired as I was before I took the nap, because that's not what's making me fatigued. I've recently gotten back into exercising, and it helps. Brian's right. It helps to stay active. And I think that that's making a big difference. So I agree with him to keep moving if you can.
Thanks, Ellie. Joan, how about you? What kinds of things have you done to help with fatigue?
All right, so this is what I do. I'm an early morning person. I get up about 5 o'clock every day. And I have to take medication. I have too much iron in my system, so I have to take XJ. I don't know if any of you all are taking that. And that slows me down because then I have to spend some time in the bathroom. But what I usually do is, every time if I'm watching something on TV or on the computer, I'll say I'm only going to sit down for a certain minute of time. Usually the commercials are the best. As soon as a commercial comes on, I get up and I do something around the house. And then after the commercial, I'll come back and sit down, or sometimes I'll extend it. So even though I can't run, I used to do a lot of walking. I can't walk like that before without getting tired. And then what I do is I make myself go out every day. It's just going to the supermarket, buying bananas, or sometimes I'll go through my favorite drive-through restaurant, just sit in my car and watch the people at the mall walk around. I just force myself to get out there. And well, I'm living in California, so I see the sun almost every day. But I just keep moving. I just keep moving. I keep moving. Usually the tiredness comes down at night, and I usually end up falling asleep watching the TV, or the TV's watching me. But I agree with Ellie and Brian. You just got to keep moving. One doctor dietitian told me, try to increase a little bit of protein in your diet. That might help too. But otherwise, I think the solution is don't give into it. Just keep moving when you can, if you can. Sometimes you just can't. I can't. You get up and you're like, oh boy, here we go. And you got to have a sense of humor about this too. Seriously, you really have to have a sense of humor about it. And I'll say one last thing. Some of my friends will say, Jen, you want to do such and such a thing? Oh, that's right. You're going to get short of breath. You're not going to be able to go. Forget about it. And I'm like, really? You're supposed to inspire me and say something like, well, if you can only walk a half a block, that's fine, or whatever. But just keep moving and don't listen to the naysayers.
I found out something else that I want to share. I did not realize that I was getting depressed. I found out about my MDS exactly when COVID hit. So COVID being around and being scared about that and having a blood cancer did me in. And I realized that I wasn't feeling good and that I couldn't even move. So the depression was adding on to my fatigue. I immediately called up my hematologist at Sloan and said, I need to have a consultation with someone. I know I need to take something for it. And I've been doing that, and it's helped because it's a normal thing if you get depressed. Then I had the heart attack, and I found out that that makes you depressed too. So I'm glad I'm still on the medication, and keeping your mental health good will help you deal with all the issues that come up with this disease because you're in better shape mentally.
Good point.
Thanks for sharing that, Ellie.
One point.
Go ahead,
Okay.
Jen.
When I ever get to a point like depression or whatever, I go to my go-to show on TV. It's called Mike and Molly. I must have seen that show over and over, but it makes me laugh and it makes me feel good. So if you have a TV show or something that you can listen to, or even music, certain songs, I would suggest that as a lifter up.
Thanks, Joan. Joan, you mentioned about diet, and that's our next question. Are there things that you did to change your diet? Were there recommendations made for you regarding diet and making any changes?
I'm eating more bananas now. I think it's the potassium. They say it's good for people with MDS. In reference to red and leafy vegetables, they say don't eat too many of them because it's an iron buildup. But to tell you the truth, I don't eat that much in itself. I usually have the standard breakfast: cereal, banana, toast, lunch, a sandwich, and dinner. But I do have somewhat of I like chocolate ice cream, so I have to keep myself from eating too much chocolate ice cream because it's just. I must say I like sweets too, so pies, cakes, whatever. But I never had a weight issue. So my doctors tell me now when I talk to them, is there a certain diet I should be on? No, we just want you to gain weight. We just want you to gain weight. You can eat anything that you want. So I'm fortunate in that area, but there's nothing that has been restricted other than when I feel really tired, I eat more I eat more protein products, meats.
Thanks, Joan. Brian, how about you? Any dietary recommendations that were made for you?
Yeah, so a little different than Joan. I'm sort of on a neutropenic diet, if you would. So everything I consume is geared toward the idea that potentially I have to watch out for infection. So I will never eat at a buffet, for instance, or uncooked raw foods. Sushi, which was one of the love of my lives before this happened, is a no-go. So there's a specific way of cooking and making sure that things are done well. There's things that I avoid, and I've since also tried to increase my protein. When I started this, actually, I was a vegan, to be honest with you. I was a vegan at diagnosis. They advised me also that I needed to have some animal protein. So I put back in chicken and turkey, but still left out red meat. So, and of course, well-cooked chicken and turkey. So that's been my journey.
Thanks, Brian. Ellie, any dietary recommendations made to you?
Yes, I'm back on a plant-based whole food, no oil diet. And the benefit of it is I lost 40 pounds since, I would say, 7 months ago, which I needed to lose. And I eat a lot of protein. I eat a lot of beans, and I eat a lot of vegetables. And beans and vegetables have a lot of protein. People just don't know it. I don't really want to eat animal products because from my body system, it creates more cholesterol, which caused me to have a heart attack. So I'm trying to eat things that won't cause it. I don't eat oil, any kind of oil, you name it, no oil, even olive oil, nothing. No avocado and no nuts because they have oil, because the oil can damage the inner lining of my arteries. And I want my arteries to be Teflon on the inside, not Velcro, which they've been in the past. I want to try to reverse the heart disease that I have. And I can do that if I really work hard at it. And it's worth it. I want to live a long time. So I'm choosing to do this. It's a hard choice, but I'm choosing it.
Thanks, Ellie. And we'll stay with you, and this will be the last question. How has MDS changed your life, and what do you think you've learned from that?
Patience. I'm more patient than I used to be. It changed my life in that I'm closer to my brother than I used to be, and my child. And I think that's a real bonus because it helped me, and I know it helped them to get closer. But it's mostly patience. I don't lose my patience as much. I'm more level than I used to be emotionally, which I think has really helped when I do have periods of time when other things go bad, which they do sometimes. Life is life.
Thanks, Ellie. Joan, how about you?
Go on, but gratefulness. When you have blood transfusions, you don't know where the blood is coming from. It could be of any diverse background, person, or whatever. So I look at life a little bit different. I mean, the person walking across the street could have donated to the blood bank, and their life they saved my life over the years. And I'm just so grateful for that. And I also look at people differently. Like Ellie, everyone has a story. Everybody has a journey, and my journey is MDS. So when I see a landscaper out there doing work, or I see the mailman, or even the Amazon man, I get a lot of deliveries. I just look at them, and I'm always engaging in some sort of conversation with, if I can. I like your shoes, or I know it's hot out today, just to make people realize that you're important. What you do in life is important. Now, I was kind of naive before I got diagnosed. I was just kind of living in a bubble at times. But now I'm like, and I look at people when I talk with them, because as I said, these people are saving my life. I don't know who has donated blood to me, but they're lifesavers. And having MDS has made me realize what's important in life. I don't want to put up with no nonsense. Some people have come and gone in my life. And I keep saying I want to get busy living. Even when people leave the earth, like my friend from the group, I said she wouldn't want me sitting around moping and complaining and, just to keep busy living. I have two sons. They lost their father about 4 years ago. I feel like I'm a single parent, which I am, I guess, in a way. But just to keep busy living, just keep busy living, just keep busy living. And that's how MDS has changed my life.
Mhm.
Thanks, Joan. Brian?
Lee, you started this by putting me sandwiched between the two great answers, and now I have to do it again. I don't know how you do this to me, but thank you. So I think the direct answer, I think, is has it changed my life significantly in so many different ways? Emotionally, I'm a completely different person. Job-wise, I've been up and down with job opportunities and losses because of the uncertainty related to MDS. But right now, I'm still changing, as opposed to how has it changed? It's changing as I go toward the next chapter of this journey, which is the bone marrow transplant. I think what it means for me, though, is overall I've learned to take one day at a time. That was a very difficult thing. My career started as a military officer, planning, future planning, as an engineer the same way. But now I'm learning a little bit more, that kind of like what was already said. I wake up, I enjoy the day, I plan my day, and I deal with what comes for the day, and then we'll deal with the tomorrows tomorrow.
Thank you so much, Joan, Ellie, and Brian, for sharing your time and your experiences and your expertise with all of us today, and sharing your stories. And thank you so much for that, because it will immeasurably help others with their diagnosis and moving forward as well. So thank you so much for everything today. If you'd like to watch this webinar again at a later time, it will be available on our website within just a few business days. If you have any additional questions, feel free to send it to us at any time by email at help@aamds.org. Give us a call at 800-747-2820, or you can contact us through our Facebook page. On behalf of the Aplastic Anemia and MDS International Foundation, thank you for joining us today, making us your resource of choice for information on bone marrow failure diseases. Our medical advisory board and team are always here to support you and your family, as we've done for the past 39 years. This concludes our program. Thank you again.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.